How long did I take to buy my first commercial property? In this video, I'm going to share with you where did I buy this property, what are the things that I looked into before I buy, and more importantly, how long did I take to buy my first commercial property. So if you want to know, watch till the end. Okay, my first property, as you know that I live in Sydney. So one of the goal that I had in terms of the income for the commercial properties that I want 7% return. That was my goal. I wanted to have a 7% return. But then I was looking in Sydney and there is no way I was getting 7% net rental return in Sydney. So I had to look elsewhere. While I was in Sydney, I had two options. I was looking for places in Queensland where I would get 7% return, or I was also looking for in Adelaide, which I would get about 7% return. But then I decided to go into Queensland. So that was my first decision to go to Queensland, simply because from Sydney it's much easier to go to Queensland. Like I can take a flight to Brisbane, and from Brisbane, if it is nearby vicinity, I can take a car and I can easily go. I did this, a prior disclaimer that I did this many times in Queensland simply because I bought quite a few residential properties earlier. So while I was looking for a commercial property, I thought, okay, the same knowledge and expertise I'm going to use, and I would be looking for in Queensland only. Now, while I was looking into a vicinity of Brisbane, I was still sort of not happy or getting that kind of return that I wanted. I wanted 7% plus, but I was getting around 6.5%. Plus, I also wanted to buy with a little bit more, if possible. So as I was doing a lot of investigation, a lot of research, I found out that the best thing that I would be looking for, not in Brisbane, a little bit farther from Brisbane. So I ended up looking in, or rather buying a property in a place called Rockhampton. It is in between Mackay and Brisbane. So it's the place, and it's close to the coastal area. Rockhampton, there's about 80 to 100,000 people are living, and it's a place that I am comfortable with at that time when I purchased my first commercial property. Now, what did I buy in that area? Petrol station. It's a service station. And why did I buy a service station? There is a story behind this. Growing up, when I was probably about 17 or 18 years old, then my maternal uncle, he wanted to buy a petrol station, or rather build. But then, of course, when I came to Australia since 2014, I did not have any kind of goals about buying a petrol station. But then when this opportunity came in Rockhampton, then I said, wow, this could be a tribute to my maternal uncle, because he passed away I think 3 years ago. But it would be a fitting kind of a tribute to him to buy a petrol station. That was one of the reasons that I wanted to buy that petrol station. Now, in terms of numbers, one of the things, this petrol station that I bought, it's not a big one. It's a smaller one. It's about the purchase price was around $1.25 million. Now, $1.25 million petrol stations, if you have not invested into commercial, you might think it's a lot of money. That's not, because generally petrol station, particularly on the highways, on the bigger petrol stations, is like 5, 6, 7, even sometimes $10 million. These are specialized assets, and as the rent goes up, based on the rent, the value of that petrol station will be, if the rent is around 800,000, then it could be a $10 million, $11 million petrol station. On the other side, if it is 100,000 rent, then of course it's 1.25 million, similar to the purchase. And that is right. I saw an opportunity where the net rent is 96,000 at that time. It has gone up since then. 96,000 per annum net rent that I will be collecting if I buy that property. And of course, they were asking for about 1 million, 1.4 million, and eventually we negotiated and we bought that property for 1.24 million. So this was a significant, it's an eye-opening for me, because most of my residential properties is giving me like 2% net rent, 2.5%, whereas this commercial property is giving me 8%, close to 8% net rent, which is called cap rate, which is called the yield. So 8% cap rate is significant as compared to a residential property 2.5%. So I was immediately hooked to look into that and did that further due diligence. Now, My budget was around 1.2 million, because that at my first property, I didn't want to buy and I didn't have that much of cash as well. Why? One thing that I did not know, a petrol station, the banks is not going to lend you more than 55 to 60% of LBR. So 60% LBR, it means that if $1.2 million is the purchase price, bank is going to only lend me 720,000, and the remaining 40%, which is like 480,000, that I have to pay from my pocket. But guess what? I did not have that money, and that's how magic works, because I didn't have money. So initially I thought that, okay, I put it under contract, but now I won't be able to buy, because I didn't know that I will not get like 70-75% loan. So what I had to do is, then I talked to my mortgage broker, and is there any way that I can do? And then they gave me a suggestion that, hey, why can't you tap equity of one of your residential property? And then this lender is happy to lend you if you refinance that property, and then they will lend you. It works for me because I'm happy as well, because I wanted to buy that property. So that is exactly I did. I took that one of the residential property and tap into that equity, because all these residential properties gone up. I had about significant like 300-400,000 of equity or even more, and then I didn't have to pay too much from my pocket. So eventually I tap into the equity, and the bank lend me 55% of the commercial property, and remaining about 30-35% equity that I tapped into, and eventually I had to pay about 10-15% from my pocket. And that is how I bought my first commercial property, which is a petrol station. It's in Rockhampton. It's an 8% net rent. It has gone up. Now, what is the so lucrative about this deal is the 15 years lease. Now, 15 years lease means it's the current vendor, at that time the vendor, they have just signed a long-term lease of 15 years, and as soon as they signed the lease, they wanted to sell. And I got hooked into that as well, because 15 years I'll be collecting the rent. On top of that, I also saw that as part of my due diligence, that there is a director's guarantee in the lease. It means that even though the company get burst, the director is giving guarantee. And when we checked how many petrol stations do they operate, they operate about 6 to 8 petrol stations at that time. They have gone up probably even more. So there is no way they will not, because they know what they're doing. They have been running this petrol station for a long time, which you have checked. And based on the director's guarantees, means they have to pay the rent for the next 15 years. Yes, they can move out and all sort of things, but we can involve our lawyer to make sure that we always get paid rent. On top of that, there are 6 months of bank guarantee, so that I can call in if they're not paying the rent. I have that insurance as well, which have a 1 year of rent guarantee. So I have actually covered quite a few things to make sure that it is a solid proof investment. So when I put this property under contract, I went there, I inspected physically. I was there looking into, I was minutely asking all the different questions. I also engaged a builder, and I make sure that builder checks all these things, the buildings and the roof and all sort of things, just to make sure. Even the underground tanks that I had to check, because if you buy a petrol station, it's not only about what is above the ground, it's also about what is under the ground. And one of the key things is that it is landlord's responsibility to whatever happens under the ground. So if there is a contamination, that is landlord's responsibility. And the tenant will have to make sure that it is keeping as per the standards and there is no oil leakage or anything. There is something called SIRA report, so which you get from the tenant every single month, and that you need to check there is no oil leakage. If there is no oil leakage, means there is no chance of having contamination. That being said, you still need to do an environmental site assessment. You need to make sure that the tenant is upkeeping the property and maintaining it so that it doesn't become too bad in the future. So before I purchased, I actually analyzed quite a few cities, and eventually I ended up into Rockhampton. I took about 5 to 6 months to do these things, and that is one of the fundamental points. If you want to buy commercial property today, and if you just found today a property and then tomorrow you are doing this, no, you need to do quite a few things. You need to make your structure ready. You need to make sure that where you are buying, you're absolutely certain what's the current rental yield that is going on, so that you don't get kind of burned in the future. Because if you just see one deal and it is too good to be true, then you need to also look into what's in that area, what's the kind of properties that is getting sold as well. So in a nutshell, eventually I ended up buying this commercial property. It's a petrol stations. I got that loan with the help of another residential property, and then I am getting 8% net rent. When I'm talking about the net rent, it means that the tenant, they pays the land tax, the management fees, then the rates and the insurance and all the maintenance as well. It is a petrol station. They have to maintain this, so to get more customers. Any kind of issues happens, they have to report me immediately, particularly the SIRA report that I check and make sure every single month that there is no leakage of the tanks. And this is how 8% net return. So it's giving me 100,000. And guess what? All of my residential properties combined is not giving me as much as net return as compared to this one commercial property. And that's the beauty of this commercial property journey, because once you get that, once you earn the money, and if you see that at the end, after the month, after every single month, after paying your mortgage, the money stays in the bank account, you start believing in it. You start seeing this. I was not there. I was also learning and educating myself into commercial property for so long. But then once I started investing, and that's how I realized that the beauty, and that's how I realized that commercial property is going to make you financially independent. Commercial property is going to give you something that what you're looking in residential, you won't get it. So how long did I take? It took about 6 months. Where did I buy? I bought it in Rockhampton. What did I buy? I bought a petrol stations. And how long did I take? It took about 6 months to do all the research and everything before I do this. And once I property make this under contract, it took about 2 months to do all my finance. I had to refinance one of the residential property, and then I got the loan and I settled the property. Ever since, every single month I have been collecting rent. After a year, the rent bump up from 96,000 to 3.5%. So it's becoming around 99,000 something per year. And then this year again, this is going to go up to another hopefully 3.5%, because the CPI increase, it depends on the CPI, or also it depends a minimum 3%. So whichever is the higher, that's the rent increase that I am going to give. It is written in the lease every single year for the next 13-14 years. It is going to keep on growing, and that is how the 15 years lease is giving me security and actually making me make sure and ensuring that it is going to go up and the rent is going to keep on going up.